Haunted New Jersey podcast number 84. Welcome everyone to Haunted New Jersey podcast number 84 on this Halloween Eve 2009. We are your hosts, Garrett Husfeth and
Al Rauber, and happy Halloween. It's as close as we get to Halloween, doing a Halloween show. You know, we're a day early.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
we
can't even get that right.
But by the time it gets out, it'll be Halloween.
Yeah, that's cool. That's good. It's a good time of the year, isn't it?
It's a fun time of year.
My favorite, I think.
Me too.
No, it's also a big time for birthdays. My grandson Gio is 1 year old today.
Oh, today, that's right.
Today's his birthday.
Wow.
Yeah, he just missed Halloween by one day.
Yeah.
You know, so love of my life. And and my partner Diane Bixler.
Tomorrow.
Right. Haunted Cape May Tours. Tomorrow's her birthday on Halloween, so it's appropriate that she has that position, isn't it?
Yes. My daughter's birthday was a couple weeks ago.
That's right. Big time for birthdays. I guess the winter was cold. It's always cold. So
we have a special guest here with us today.
We do. We have an old friend of mine and a very special guest, and it's wonderful to have him here at this time of year. Angus Crest Gillespie is our guest. Angus is the head of the American Studies Department at Rutgers University. Welcome.
Yeah, Al, I have to correct you. I'm not the head.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm a full professor.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, you're the head, okay?
Well, I'm the head folklorist.
Okay.
I'm the only folklorist.
Yeah. No, it's great that you're here. We've been trying to get you down here for a while, and I do appreciate your taking the time to spend a night with us here in the crazy podcast that we do.
My pleasure.
So what do you guys have to talk about tonight? Because I'm manning the computers again.
Yeah. We thought that since Angus is here, we'll dedicate most of the show to folklore. Not typically, typically we do something just on ghosts and hauntings and EVP and things like that. But there is a tie-in, and I think it would be great to talk about some of the legends of New Jersey, and especially some of the things that Angus has done in regards to the folklore of New Jersey. I think one of the things, to get started, why don't we first ask, what exactly is the American Studies Department? What does that mean?
And that's a fair question. American Studies got its start in the academy back in the 1930s at the Ivy League schools, Yale and Harvard and Penn. And the idea back in the 30s was you had sort of a rigid partition between American history and American literature. And there were some rebels who said, well, look, if you're going to be studying Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter, the novel, you ought to be studying the history of the Puritans at the same time. Mm-hmm. If you're going to be studying Herman Melville's Moby Dick, you should be studying the history of New England and the history of whaling. I think today that seems like common sense, but in the 30s it was kind of a radical concept. And I think in American studies we're sort of fond of saying that if English and history had been doing their jobs, there would have been no need for American studies. But it's also true that after World War II, American studies expanded into anthropology. And this was a direct result of the war, because as it turned out, the U.S. Navy, in its island-hopping campaign across the Pacific, realized that in order to defeat Japan and establish air bases on these remote Pacific islands, they would have to win the hearts and minds of the local people.
Of course.
And to win the hearts and minds of the local people, they would have to understand their culture. So they hired anthropologists to instruct the naval officers on what to say, what to do, how to behave. And typical for the military, it was very systematic, and they had file cards and index cards, and they had it all arranged. The family, the education, the economics, the politics, the religion of each of these cultures. And so the American Studies Department at Penn sort of glommed onto that tool, which was called the Human Relations Area Files, HRAF. So, for example, if you wanted to look up marriage customs of the Trobriand Islanders, you could just find it. Of course, this is sort of pre-computer,
right?
But it's since been computerized, and it's really a very powerful cross-cultural tool. So, and then we expanded to anthropology, and then I think along in the 60s and 70s, they began to add folklore as well. Because folklore is a little bit like anthropology, but not quite. Because anthropology, you might say, is a social science. They're studying the family, the education, the religion. Whereas folklore tends to go into the more creative aspects like storytelling or song singing. So I guess, and then they added art history. And so it's sort of grown like Topsy, so that an American studies major at a place like Rutgers could take a course in art history and anthropology and sociology and criminal justice. It's a regular smorgasbord, all of which feeds into an understanding of American culture.
Well, it's interesting, one thing you pointed out, because is it true, or maybe I'm wrong, that folklore, all folklore, I guess, has a root in something that actually really did happen, or in most cases, something happened that spurred the story.
Right. I'm getting a little ahead of myself with that question, but it's okay. Like tonight we're planning to talk about the Jersey Devil.
Right.
And certainly there must have been something that happened back in 1735 that launched the story.
Right.
Just exactly which details are quote-unquote true, it's very difficult to determine. But yes, I think you're right. There's some basis for these understandings.
And there's also, Angus and I, one of the things that, when I was with the New Jersey Society of Parapsychology, before it became a soothsayer and a
bang-gonging society,
fortune-telling,
incense,
incense burning group. One of the things I did as the program director was I brought in speakers that I thought would be interesting in other branches or other types of interest, not only ghost stuff, I brought people in to talk about crop circles and people into, and I contacted Angus back then to speak about cryptozoology, which is really big today.
Yeah.
I mean, that's out there all the time. You turn on the television,
right.
Somebody's, finding another, or going after another unknown species,
Yeah. Well, yeah, evidence of that is the popularity of this History Channel program, Monster Quest.
Mm-hmm. Right, which
every
you were
Wednesday
on.
they come up with a different monster.
Yeah.
Right, and you took part in one in the Jersey Devil episode.
Yeah. In fact, I was talking with Tom Phillips, who's the producer-director of the Jersey Devil segment, and I said, what are you guys going to do when you run out of monsters?
I know, they're gonna.
and
Make them up.
He said, shh, don't even bring up that topic, because it's full employment for him.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, we did mention, let's not get right to the Jersey Devil. Let's talk about a few other things. We just touched on cryptozoology. what exactly is cryptozoology? I didn't give it a good definition.
Well, the narrow definition is cryptozoology from the Latin and the Greek. Crypto is hidden. Zoology is the study of animals. So this is the study of hidden animals. Or if we want to expand that, we could say it's the study of animals that may or may not exist. And so the classic examples would be the Loch Ness Monster, the abominable snowman in the Himalayas, and then his cousin in the Pacific Northwest, Bigfoot.
Right.
And I think it's legitimate to put the Jersey Devil in that category too. It has animal-like characteristics.
Right. Well, we spoke about folklore. Is there a definition of folklore that you could give us?
Yeah. In my classes at Rutgers in Folklore 101, I say that there are 5 diagnostic criteria. And I'll give them and then I'll explain them.
Okay.
We say that it's oral, it's traditional, it's anonymous, it's formulaic, and it exists in different versions. But if I back up, it's oral. That is, folklore ideally is passed along by word of mouth. It's not written down.
Especially the older folklore.
Right. Of course, once the folklorist comes along, it does tend to get... But
ideally,
it's oral. We say it's traditional in as much as these stories are passed along father to son, mother to daughter, grandparents to grandchildren, generation after generation. It's oral, it's traditional, it's anonymous. That is, take the example of the Jersey Devil story. That goes all the way back to 1735. We don't know who authored that story. Unlike Moby Dick, it's by Herman Melville.
Right.
Or Oliver Twist is by Charles Dickens. Or Hamlet is by Shakespeare. But for folk tales, it's anonymous. So it's oral, it's traditional, it's anonymous. We say it's formulaic, which is a polite way of saying it's full of cliches.
Okay.
So in folk song and ballad, for example, we hear about the foggy, foggy dew, the milk white steed, the buried treasure, the king's daughter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, kissing the frog. These are repeated elements over and over again. And then the fifth and last diagnostic criteria is that it's various. That is to say, it exists in different versions, which makes perfect sense because if it's really oral, passed along by word of mouth, and it's not written down, it's going to undergo change in the process of transmission. A good example, I'll give away my age. Years ago in grammar school, there was a game, it was called Whisper Down the Lane, where the teacher would tell a kid a story, and the instructions would be repeat the story and don't make any changes, and whisper it to the next kid and the next kid and the next kid. And, of course, as you know, when it gets to the end, it's all changed around, despite their best efforts to keep it uniform. And now it's evolved. I think the teachers now call the game telephone.
Right.
And eventually it's probably going to be called cell phone.
Texting.
Yeah.
That's good. How about similar terminology, folk life?
Yeah, that came in the 60s. Folklore had looked at things like myth and legend and tale and ballad and folk song, pretty much oral genres, categories. Just like in English you have the novel, the poetry, the short story, the essay. But a lot of scholars said, we're really missing the boat. What about material culture? So they started to study architecture and fences and barns and quilts and agricultural tools and kind of all manner of material culture relating to folk society. And indeed, at the University of Pennsylvania, the department is called the Department of Folklore and Folk Life. And people tend to specialize in one area or the other.
So I guess somebody can study like Amish life would be...
Perfect, the perfect example.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Life,
Yeah, that's a perfect example because ideally the Amish don't want to use electricity, for example.
Right.
And that leads to all kinds of complications. And they're reluctant to mechanize their agriculture. and they used windmills to power up the water supply. And it's real interesting to study the Amish because there are some fudge factors. For example, you're not allowed to have a telephone in your home, but you can have a phone booth out by the road.
And use it right.
And Amish are not allowed to drive motor vehicles, but they can accept rides from their neighbors.
Yep.
So they're not stupid. They adjust to reality and changing times.
Right.
But they're very cautious. They don't want to go overboard with this.
No, of course. New Jersey as a state is ripe with folklore and legends. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think my folklore colleagues in other states would probably dispute that. But accepting your premise, I think part of the reason is New Jersey is geographically small.
Right.
And has, last time I checked, 10 million population?
Yeah, it's like the most dense, isn't it? The most
Exactly.
populated state?
In fact, population geographers tell us that the population density of New Jersey is greater than that of India.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And as a result, I mean, there are other interesting statistics, like we have more highway intersections than any other state.
Well, I would think something also has to do with the length of settlement, too.
Yeah,
New
that's
Jersey is
reasonable.
one of the 13 colonies, one of the first settled. So,
But I'd be reluctant to belittle our sister states. I mean,
No,
I'm
I
sure
would-
they have folklore that they're proud
I'm
of.
sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure folklore is inherent, and every state has its own stories, especially out west. I bet you there's some really good ones out there. But we started to talk, and we touched on the Jersey Devil. That's New Jersey's official monster. I don't know if any other state has an official monster, but New Jersey does. Voted on by the legislature. Waste your time.
If I'm
doing
not
that.
mistaken, I think that took place in 1937.
The vote?
Yeah, it was a while ago. Yep, it was a while ago.
And a couple years back, I was invited by the New Jersey Assembly to give a folklore talk after hours, just for general enlightenment.
Did you do it?
Yeah. But I was very gratified to notice in the assembly chambers above the speaker's podium, there was a mural with the Jersey Devil. Isn't that interesting?
Well, that's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, let me tell you, before we get into the Jersey Devil, can we take a break?
Sure.
I just want to do the drawing for, we're having a drawing tonight for Lloyd Auerbach's book, Hauntings and Poltergeists, A Ghost Hunter's Guide. And we were hoping that Angus could reach in, pull out a name and hand it to me, and I'll read the winner.
So it's totally
not above
fixed.
board.
We've got
Okay.
perfect.
You got the grab bag there?
Yep.
All right.
Yeah. In the interest of full disclosure, I did not know about this drawing before I came in tonight, and I don't know any of the contestants.
Okay.
So I'm reaching into this basket with a random selection, and here goes.
All right. Thank
Garrett.
you. Let's see who the winner is. Michael Hammond. And I don't know where Michael is, but he won. So I don't know where he's from. But I'll find out. So, Michael, you're the winner, and I'll send you an email and get your address and mail you out the book right away. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll be back.
This is Lex with Anything Ghost, and I've been a Haunted New Jersey listener for I don't know how long. It's the only place to be for an intelligent look at the paranormal. I'm going to grab my Haunted New Jersey beer stein, kick back, and listen to the rest of this podcast. Cheers.
So you want to talk about the Jersey Devil?
Sure do.
Okay.
Angus, that's I know. Again, that was the subject of the television show you did.
Yes.
The Jersey Devil. Yeah. Why don't you go walk us through the story?
Okay. Someday in the late fall, when you're walking through the woods of South Jersey, listen carefully. Perhaps you can hear the wind coming in off the ocean through the pines. Sometimes it even seems like the wind is trying to tell us something, possibly someone's name. Old Motherly Old Mother Leeds. It seems that Jane Leeds and her husband Daniel lived in a small cabin along the Mullica River. And folks in those parts said that it was a strange couple. Something was definitely off, but they weren't sure what it was. But some folks said that Jane Leeds was a witch. What we do know is that Jane and Daniel Leeds had a very large family. They had 12 kids. And now Daniel Leeds, he was a very good hunter. He was known for his ability to bag the venison. And he was not a bad fisherman either. He would go out in the bay and do quite well. And they had a huge garden, not just like a suburban garden, but this was a serious garden where they would put up the vegetables for the winter. So the family, they never really wanted for food. I mean, everything was okay in that regard. But Daniel Leeds, he didn't take much interest in the children. And so, because he was always out hunting and fishing and gardening. And so Jane Leeds was stuck with all the child care, the meal preparation, not to mention in those days, no appliances. So she had to chop the wood and fetch the water. It's exhausting, picking things up, putting things away. And then one night, she learned that she was pregnant with her 13th child. And in a moment of perhaps understandable weakness, as she was saying her bedtime prayers, she said, "Lord, let this one be a devil. I don't need more children." Well, we now know that that was a mistake. Because on that terrible February night in 1735, when Mother Leeds' 13th child was born, it started out, it was a little handsome baby boy with blonde hair and blue eyes and looked perfectly normal. But then something went terribly wrong. In the space of less than 20 minutes, the creature grew to the size of 2 full-grown men. And in place of the charming baby face, there was a face all right, but it was a horrible head of a horse. And in place of those baby blue eyes, there were eyes all right, but they were burning red, like 2 burning coals. So the creature had the torso of a man, the head of a horse, but on either side of the head of the horse there were horns. It was very bizarre. And then where the shoulder blades should have been, there were giant, leathery, bat-like wings. The creature had the feet of a goat and a long serpentine tail. The chest was massive and powerful. The biceps were massive and powerful. His arms on both sides were covered with hair and fur, and at the end of each arm were hairy paws. At the end of each paw were long, bony fingers. And at the end of each finger were razor-sharp fingernails. And then, unexpectedly, with one swipe of his right hand, he slit the throat of the midwife and attendants, who collapsed in a pool of blood. The creature gave out a blood-curdling scream and escaped out the chimney, where he has terrified the people of South Jersey for the last 250 years. Now, folks in these parts say that something disturbs the cattle late at night, and the next day the milk turns sour. Tool buildings and sheds and outhouses are turned over in the middle of the night. Strange tracks are found round about. Places in the forest are scorched. Have you seen Mother Leeds' 13th child? The next time you go into the woods, take care. And when you hear the sudden crack of a twig behind you, beware. Beware of the Jersey Devil.
Good story.
Yeah, it is a good story.
You know, that's good that you said that because, I mean, he's been cited many, 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 many times, right?
Yes.
Over the years.
But inconveniently, no one has ever had a camera at the time.
Yeah, that happens with ghosts a lot.
Yeah.
Same thing. But not only in South Jersey, right? It's not confined to South
There
Jersey.
have been sightings as far south as Delaware, as far west as eastern Pennsylvania. But oddly enough, it's seldom above Trenton. I mean, it might be occasional, but pretty much it's a South Jersey creature.
Right. Do you have actual background history on the Leeds family and where they actually lived, or is that part of the folklore too?
It's shaky. I recall I give a number of library talks going around the state about the Jersey Devil, and one time there was a family in attendance who were descendants of the Leeds family, and they had a genealogy, which they shared with me. But to be honest, I haven't aggressively pursued that angle.
Okay.
Oh, now that's interesting. You have the book by McCloy and Miller.
The McCloy Miller book, I think, was for years it was the only thing out there about the Jersey Devil. Those of you who are interested, it's you can actually still get it online.
It's in print.
Yeah. Okay. And it's really reasonable too. It's a red cover and it's got a creature with a serpentine tail and wings.
What's it called?
It's called the Jersey Devil.
Okay.
And it's all red.
Right.
But there is a picture in here, and I don't know. Again, I don't know if this is something that's accurate or not. But it looks like an old farmhouse that's fallen into disrepair.
Yeah, this is on page 29.
Yeah, dating
and
back
it's
to
called the
1952.
Shor's House, as it was photographed in 1952.
Okay.
But I did my field work in the mid 70s, and by the time I came along, that house had collapsed.
Okay.
But it's interesting. The local people are never deterred by that. They just move on and find another old house.
Call it. That's a good story. Now, would you consider this to be a tale of folklore?
No, not exactly, Al. Because you notice the way I told the story. I told the story as if it were true.
Right.
Now, a folk tale is different because in a folk tale is like the short story of folklore. And there are giveaways in the folk tale that reveal that it's fiction. And we do that with framing devices. So classically, with the folk tale, we begin with once upon a time, and we end with they lived happily ever after. And those framing devices signal to the listener that this is a story to educate or entertain, but it's not to be believed.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
So once upon a time, but I didn't say that with the Jersey Devil, because the Jersey Devil is entirely different.
Well, then would this be considered a myth or a legend?
Good question. Myth and legend are very closely related. Both myth and legend are belief tales. So by the formal definition for both myth and legend, it's a story in which the teller believes it to be true. However, in general, myth is far away and long ago. So we speak of the Greek and Roman myths. Like, for example, the Greeks believed that the sun traveled from east to west because it was pulled by a chariot. So
that's not true?
It's a belief tale. I always duck that kind of question. But the Jersey Devil, bingo, it's a legend. Because legend, like myth, is a belief tale, believed by the teller to be true, but it's more in the here and now in ordinary secular location. So 1735 is not that long ago, as history is written.
Right.
And South Jersey is not a particularly exotic location, at least not for us.
No.
At the Pine Barrens.
So it's the Jersey Devil would be relatively here and now. So it conforms to the definition of a legend.
Okay, well,
It's
that's
a
good.
localized belief tale.
Okay. Well, here, let's bear with me on this one. All right.
All right.
Over the years, the story of the Jersey Devil seems to have influenced movies and books. The movie The Village, for example, which came out 2004 with these creatures. I mean, obviously taken from, some was taken from the legend of the Jersey Devil. John Keel's book, The Mothman Prophecies. Again, similarity between the Mothman in what he looked like and the Jersey Devil. Is it possible that the legend of the Jersey Devil even goes back pre-Mother Leeds to maybe the Lenape Indians, who may have had some winged creature or phoenix or whatever, firebird or something that they talked about, and maybe was all put into the same story? I don't know if that's possible, but
I've heard that theory advanced, that there perhaps was a pre-existing American Indian legend.
I thought that was my theory. I just came up with that. Yeah. I didn't know if there was actually a theory.
I've heard people say that.
Okay.
I'm a little skeptical because I suspect that if you look at the Leeds family, these were Scots-Irish people from the British Isles, and there are similar stories in the British Isles. I think this is a localized version of a British legend.
Right.
That's my hunch. I think to try and tie it to the American Indians is a bit of a stretch. Okay. I would respectfully suggest, but with this stuff, I can't prove that.
Right.
I could be wrong. Yeah.
Right. Well, at what point in history was the Jersey Devil most active?
Good question. In the book, which you have right there, it's by McCloy and Miller. It's called The Jersey Devil, published by the Middle Atlantic Press. It came out in 1976. It has a whole chapter on the 1909 sightings. Most of the 1909 sightings were in present-day Camden County, Burlington, Haddonfield, Collingswood. But what we have to remember is in 1909, this was not suburban Philadelphia. There's the list. Thank you. Burlington, Pemberton, Haddonfield, Collingswood, Moorestown, and Riverside. That's page 49 in the book. That's where the Jersey Devil was sighted. There was a rash of sightings in the first 3 weeks of January 1909. The actual tracks were found. And as I said, in those days, it was not suburbanized Philadelphia. This was a rural area. And then something kind of interesting happened. The Philadelphia newspapers sent out teams of illustrators and reporters. It was hopeless to use photography because nobody could get a photograph of the creature. But they did have eyewitness accounts, and so presumably the illustrator would interview people and then make a drawing based on what the respondent said that he or she saw. But a strange thing happened, and McCloy and Miller kind of explained this. I think they could have gone in more detail, but what I take away from that chapter is that these city slicker reporters from Philadelphia took a rather patronizing attitude towards these South Jersey farmers. And if you look at the illustrations from the 1909 sightings, which are in this book, they're mostly humorous. They're almost like cartoons rather than reportage. Yep. And the accounts are kind of tongue-in-cheek. So it's clear to me that the reporters and the illustrators were having fun with this topic.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
And it's all in good fun, but it created tremendous problems for people like myself when I came along 60 years later in the mid-1970s when I did most of my field work on this topic. What I found was that the Pine Barren residents were very reluctant to talk to outsiders like me because of fear of ridicule, fear of derision, because Pineys aren't stupid. They read the newspapers too, and they said, well, look, if these city slickers are going to come in and make fun of us, we're not going to cooperate with them. And so I kind of hit a brick wall. And what I learned through hard experience, I did most of my research in Ocean County in the Waretown Forked River area, was when I was interviewing people, old-timers, I never mentioned the Jersey Devil. I talked about hunting. I talked about fishing. I talked about gardening. I talked about lifestyle, trials and tribulations. And only if they brought it up would I pursue the Jersey Devil, because it was really kind of a taboo topic. And I think worked for me because my conclusion is that there are many old South Jersey families that really do believe in the Jersey Devil, but it's a family tradition that's private, and they're not going to share it eagerly with outsiders. In some cases, I had to promise anonymity and confidentiality.
Well, but you got their confidence first, and then they opened up to you, which was smart. I'll tell you what. I wish I had a nickel for every time I did a tour in Cape May, and somebody asked for the story of the Jersey Devil. It had nothing to do with Cape May or pretty much with a ghost in Cape May. But
it's interesting you mention that, because here we are on Halloween Eve, and we're talking about the Jersey Devil.
Right.
And a lot of my students at Rutgers, understandably, they make the connection between the Jersey Devil and Halloween, because Halloween is a time of scary witches and goblins. But the truth is, there's no logical connection whatsoever between the Jersey Devil and Halloween.
Right. The
Jersey Devil operates
or something, right?
Yeah, the Jersey Devil operates 365
That's right.
days a year, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
That's right.
And if he shows up on Halloween, well, it's a coincidence. But that's not the business
It's
that
a
he's
plus.
in. Yeah.
It's a plus, right? Okay, well, here's a question for you. In your research and in your gathering knowledge on the Jersey Devil, is there any connection between sightings of the Jersey Devil and periods of personal or local misfortune? For example, I know when you read about the Mothman, for example, when he's seen, normally there's some tragedy that occurs afterwards. Is there anything like that?
A number of writers and scholars have argued that the Jersey Devil appears in 7-year cycles. They've also argued that the Jersey Devil has appearances whenever a war breaks out. I can't confirm that. I haven't observed the 7-year cycle or the war breaking out, but you do come across that argument in the literature all the time.
We weren't fighting anybody in 1910, were we?
I don't think so.
No, 1910.
And 1909 was a heavy year for the Jersey Devil sightings, right? So I think we were at peace at that time. All right, let's move away from the Jersey Devil now and just talk about other types of legends.
Sure.
What are religious legends, for example?
Well, I remember when I was in 7th grade, I went to Catholic school, and it was taught by monks, and religion was the first subject of every day. And since that was the monks' favorite topic, it often ran until about lunchtime, sort of brushing aside language arts and math and geography. But I never objected, because every day he had a big, thick book, and it was a compendium of the saint stories.
Oh, okay.
And in the Roman Catholic Church, if you want to be a saint, there has to be at least one verifiable miracle.
Right.
And they're great stories.
Yep.
So I would call them religious legends. I mean, they're believed by the devout, but it's a stretch, because these things are miraculous.
Yeah.
And similarly, the Mormons, which is an indigenous American religion, they were persecuted, as you remember, in the Midwest, in places like Illinois and Ohio, and they took themselves to Utah, and that's pretty tough. You're going through the arid West with hand carts, and according to the Mormon stories, there were 3 Nephites, which are like Mormon saints, who would appear from time to time with food and water to rescue them. So I would say that that's a religious legend also.
Right, that's right. Well, yeah, the stories of the saints. I mean, there's always normally there's they meet with some ill fate, some horrendous death or something, and it's all things that would.
But being a martyr is not enough. You still have
to have that miracle in your pocket, right?
Yeah,
right, ready to throw out there. Okay, well, what about supernatural legends, UFO stories, alien abductions, all of these things, cattle mutilations, Men in Black? How do they all fit into the scheme of legends?
Well, I would say that these are contemporary legends, and we come back to the definition. A legend is a belief tale. So in these UFO stories, they're generally sightings that are reported by people who believe that they've seen UFOs. And as a scholar, I'd like to unpack that term. In my opinion, there's no question that there are UFOs, because what is a UFO? It's an unidentified flying object.
So they have to exist.
So, yeah, it's unidentified. That
Right.
doesn't mean it's a flying saucer from an
Right.
alien galaxy.
Right.
But it is unidentified. Now that you move it up a notch, and you remember the X-Files series a few years
Yes.
back about alien abductions. This is really fascinating stuff, and I'm not a psychologist, but there are people who swear that they were abducted, and they have these detailed stories with the detailed descriptions, and they believe it to be true. You can't disprove it, even though it's hard to believe it.
Well, it's fun, and we'll get right back to this. But what you just said. I mean, and I've met them. I've met people that claim that they've been abducted by aliens.
Yeah.
But I think with the publicity over the last 30 years on UFOs and on alien abductions, more and more people now either are coming out and saying it or are falling into the trap of thinking they were abducted.
Well, the power of suggestion.
Yes. And so I don't know how many of those stories are true, but I've had people come up to me and actually tell me about their abduction.
Well, one also suspects, like the recent case where that family said that the 6-year-old boy was in the flying balloon.
In a balloon, yeah.
Right.
Balloon boy.
I don't want to cast aspersions, but it could be people looking for publicity.
Yes. It could easily, huh? You're looking for a reality show today,
or being mentally ill,
or being mentally ill. Yeah, sure.
And in this same category would be the cattle mutilations,
Right.
Which,
And they were huge in the 70s and into the 80s. There was a lot of reports on cattle mutilations. Not as many today, I don't think. Yeah.
And then there's also the whole Men in Black phenomenon, which it feeds into conspiracy theories.
Right.
We have all these secret agencies like the CIA and the Secret Service and I don't know what all, and they think each military branch has its own spy agency. So the Men in Black, well, that's plausible.
Yeah. It's plausible when it's presented that way, but in the Mothman, if you remember the Mothman prophecies, these guys were driving cars from like the 1940s in perfect, pristine condition, and they were wearing clothes all black clothes that were suits, that were in the style of the 30s and 40s and stuff. It wasn't something that somebody in an agency today would be wearing or driving,
Right.
Yeah. But no, that's interesting. And you know what? It's also crop circles. That's another one.
Yeah.
That's another one that was big back in the 70s and 80s. 80s, I guess, the crop circles.
and even
really
early
big.
90s. Yeah.
And then some people admitted to going out and doing it, and they tried to throw all of them into that category.
Right.
And actually, you can't. You can't. There actually are
In
unexplained
that connection,
crop
I think of the movie with Kevin Costner, Field of Dreams.
Yeah.
Great
Yeah,
movie.
remember that?
Yeah.
That was a great movie.
Yeah, it was.
That was a great movie.
And my favorite line from that movie was at one point, it said, "Is this heaven?" "No, it's Iowa."
There you go. What
A bit of boosterism.
Yeah, a little, to get that tour. And I think the place is still there, right? The field is still there.
Now
Oh,
it's
is
a
it?
tourist attraction.
Yeah, attraction, yeah. I think so. What are revenants?
Well, this is right up your alley.
Okay.
Revenant is a French term which means returner. And the notion is that a ghost will tend to return to a place of great emotional turmoil or trauma. Now, I'm treading on your expertise here, but my understanding as a folklorist is a cemetery is not a particularly good place to look for ghosts.
Right.
Yeah. I have to
Although the
agree with
layman
you.
thinks so. The better place to look for a ghost is a place where there was a traumatic experience.
Yes.
A murder, a jilted lover, a battlefield wound,
An emotional
an
event.
emotional event. And the revenant is simply a returner. The spirit of the deceased returns to the scene.
Okay, like
Which
a
makes
place memory.
sense.
Yeah.
Like a place memory or something.
Right.
It imprints itself into the atmosphere. Oh, okay. That looks good. See, I didn't know that, even though I've been in this field for over 40
No, I never
years.
heard that term before.
Yeah, I know.
Well, you guys have to go to graduate school in folklore.
Yeah, I think so. Or touch up my French again.
It's not so hard. You just take $50,000 in 10 years.
Yeah, really. I know, today. Angus, what are urban legends?
Yeah. Well, we talked about the Jersey Devil, and I said that, legends are different from myth because they're relatively here and now. But the urban legends are really here and now. And I have a colleague, Jan Harold Brunvand, who has written at least a dozen books on this topic. And I think our listeners will recognize a lot of these stories. One of the classic stories is about the vanishing hitchhiker.
Oh, right.
And I'm sure
right.
you've heard it, but just to recap, the guy is driving along a lonely, windswept, rain-swept, two-lane blacktop road in West Jersey, and there's a beautiful young girl, kind of distraught, who's hitchhiking, and he pulls over and picks her up, and she has a sweater, and she's sitting in the back seat, and she gives directions of the place that she needs to be dropped off. As I recall, was in Belvedere, up there in the extreme northwest corner, and the guy knows the area, so he drives up to whatever this was, like 110 Main Street in Belvedere, and he turns around, and the girl is gone, but the sweater is there.
Right.
And so he doesn't know quite what to do, and he takes the sweater, he goes to the house, he rings the doorbell, and the girl's mother comes to the door, and he said he picked her up, but she disappeared. And she said, well, this happens from time to time. She died on an automobile accident at that very place you picked her up.
It's similar to Resurrection Mary in Chicago, right?
Right.
Yeah, you're right. And I bet each state has that same story.
Yeah. Well, and you notice the way I told it, it's localized. Almost always the urban legends are localized. Another example of the urban legend is the legend of the death car. And there was, according to the legend, there's a automobile dealer in Bound Brook who has a really nice car. I forget it. It's like a luxury car, Maserati or some very expensive car. And unfortunately, there had been a mob hit, and there had been a decaying body in the trunk in the summertime for about 3 months. And despite their best efforts, they couldn't get rid of the stench. And so the dealer put an ad in the paper and said, you can have a Maserati for $100. And everybody came in droves to take care of this great deal.
Yeah.
But nobody bought the car. It was just unacceptable. That's an urban legend. And then I'm sure you've heard the story of the hook.
The hooker man?
Yeah. There's a teenage couple who go to Lover's Lane, and they're parked in a remote area in the woods. And for some reason, after they've been petting and necking for a while, the guy's unable to start the car again. And he says he's going to go for help. And he tells the girl to lock herself in the car. And then she waits and waits, and she hears this scratching noise on the roof, and she doesn't know quite what it is. The guy comes the next morning, and there was the hooker man whose feet were scratching the roof of the car had been hung from a tree. And that's what was causing the scratching noise.
Oh, okay. And there's also, well, we'll talk about it after a little bit later, but there's also the story of, I think it's also called the Hooker Man up in Washington.
In Long Valley.
Yeah, which is a different story altogether, but it's similar. Here we can touch on it right now. It was basically, I guess, a train conductor or something who lost his hand.
He was supposedly killed.
He's out there with the lantern.
Yeah, and he had a hook, in place of his hand, and he would carry the lantern in his hook, and you could still see the lights supposedly.
Right.
Up in Long Valley, and friends of ours investigated that.
Right.
Actually did investigate and found out that it had nothing to do with it. It was piezoelectric energy coming out of the ground that was causing the light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Another urban legend, perhaps you've heard of this one. It seems like back in the 40s, during the war, there was an inventor in Detroit, and he developed a carburetor. It was a special carburetor that saved on gas. And even an ordinary Ford, an ordinary Chevrolet, could get like 60 miles to the gallon. And it worked. But Detroit was in cahoots with the petroleum industry, and they suppressed the invention. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a conspiracy theory tied into the urban legend.
Tied into that. It makes sense today, doesn't it? After all. How about anything else that you would consider?
Yeah, another variation of the urban legend is contamination in food, which sometimes actually happens.
Right.
There might be a mouse in the soda. There might be a worm in the hamburger. But because this leads to lawsuits, some dishonest people have been known to plant the mouse in the soda or plant the worm in the hamburger.
Okay.
And so corporations are now very suspicious of such claims, and they go to great lengths to
fight them.
Yes.
To fight these cases. Yeah.
I'm going to tell you a true story now. This is no legend. When I was in college, I worked at a place in Allentown, Pennsylvania, which was a fast food place. I was the manager there. And I do recall we were having problems with our soda machine at one point, and we had somebody from the company come in to look at it, and there was a mouse in the soda line. Yeah, yeah. And I don't know how long it was there. I don't know who drank the soda. I didn't drink soda, so
that's nasty.
But so there is a basis of truth in a lot of legends.
Yeah. Now, somewhat related to that, perhaps you recall this, the giant company Procter & Gamble. They have all kinds of products, including laundry soap and dish soap. They had a logo. Maybe you remember it. It had sort of a female figure and a moon and the stars.
Yep.
And some people got on their case and said that this was witchcraft and devil worship.
I remember that.
Yeah. And I think urban legends are a lot like rumors. You know, it spreads by word of mouth. And Procter & Gamble had this symbol, I don't remember, ever since about 1887.
Right.
And it was completely off base. It had nothing to do with devil worship or witchcraft. But they gave up. I mean, they couldn't fight the rumor. And they changed their logo.
What about personal legends about people, famous historical people or something?
Yeah. A lot of legends come to mind about people. For example, and I'm sure you've heard of these, there was an author named Parson Weems who wrote a biography of George Washington. And in that biography, Parson Weems was largely winging it and just making stuff up. And it was Parson Weems who gave us the story of George Washington chopping down the cherry tree and coming clean with his father. Yep. No historical evidence for that whatsoever. It was Parson Weems who told the story that George Washington threw the silver dollar across the Potomac River. No historical basis whatsoever. But kind of plausible, and you're trying to make the guy look like a hero, and he's the father of our country.
It might happen,
And so that's kind of an interesting example where literature enters the realm of folklore.
Right, and actually starts,
Did he? Do you know what year that he wrote that stuff?
I don't know. You could Google it and find out.
Okay, yeah, it'd be interesting. I didn't know that those legends or rumors came from that particular author.
Yeah, but because probably when you were in grammar school, probably the teacher told you as truth.
Yeah.
Because she probably believed it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Another similar story, George Bernard Shaw, the British playwright. Again, this is probably an apocryphal story, but it's a great story. He was at a nightclub, and he was flirting with a showgirl, and the showgirl was coming on to him and said, Mr. Shaw, you have the best mind in the United Kingdom, and I have the best body in the United Kingdom, and we should get together, and we could have the perfect child. And George Bernard Shaw is said to have said, yes, but what if this child has my body and your brains?
Yeah, that's pretty good thinking, though. Wow, could have happened. What about any other local legends?
Yeah, there's tons of these, and every state, every locality has these. For example, there's a story about a prisoner who's tried and convicted for murder, but he didn't do it. This happens,
Right.
and he's in jail, and the night before his execution, there's a terrible thunderstorm with thunder and lightning, and there's a lightning bolt that comes in the yard of the jail, and the lightning bolt etches a picture on the glass, and it's the guy's picture. As if to say, God is indicating that this guy is innocent.
Right.
Or at least that's
And that's something local to this area.
yeah. Well, actually, I believe that took place in Mauchunk, Pennsylvania,
Oh, okay.
which
Well,
is now
still
called
close.
Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania.
Right,
Okay.
right. Still close.
Yeah. Another local legend, I think that this legend can be found in all 50 states. I haven't researched all 50, but it's the Lover's Leap legend. And the way this story gets told is there was an Indian brave and an Indian maiden, and they fell in love. But unfortunately, they were from two different tribes. And their parents disapproved of their marriage. So they went to this huge cliff and leaped to their death. And just about every large cliff in the United States, they tell this story.
Wow.
And-
Lovers Leaps.
Yeah. Now, another one that works out nicely for New Jersey is the idea in major construction projects like the George Washington Bridge, the Lincoln Tunnel, the Holland Tunnel, the Meadowlands Stadium. Almost all these big civil engineering projects involve the use of rebar and poured concrete. And according to the legend, he encountered this all the time. They'll say, well, when they built the George Washington Bridge, 7 workmen fell into the foundation, and they're buried in the concrete.
Wow. I wonder if that's like the legend about the Delaware Canal, about all the Irishmen who died from the.
Actually, that has some
and
historical
I think that's
significance.
I think that's actually a true story, right?
Yeah, but were they buried in the canal?
Yeah, I don't know where they. Nobody knows where they were buried. They
Probably in
wouldn't
the
certainly.
towpath.
But they wouldn't have been buried right there because if they had the disease, why would they bury them right there where the people were still working?
I don't know.
You think that they would bury them at a different site, right?
But they don't know where they are, right?
No,
Yeah.
nobody's
I
ever.
suspect they're in the towpath.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, because the towpath is built up earth.
Right, it is built up.
That'd be a very convenient place to put them.
It would, and there was there was an awful lot, I think, who died, right? In the
Hundreds?
epidemic. Yeah, that was a lot. I don't remember how many, but it's kind of sad. Okay, well, we've pretty much covered an awful lot. I just had a couple more questions. We had talked earlier about and getting back to the Jersey Devil about the hockey team, the Jersey Devil, right?
Yeah. As a folklorist, I have a bone to pick with that whole thing. I mean, of course, when I'm being a reasonable civilian, I can accept the idea that you have the New Jersey Devils hockey team. But as a professional folklorist, it sticks in my craw for a number of reasons. First of all, it's simply wrong. The creature is not the New Jersey Devil. He's the Jersey Devil.
Right.
And it's singular. He is the New Jersey Devil. So, I mean, I don't know. They screwed it all up. They call it the New Jersey Devils. So
Yeah,
the
plural.
word "new" doesn't belong, and it's not plural. And what's more, the old families in South Jersey to whom this legend is practically sacred, they never call it the Jersey Devil. They call it the Leeds Devil.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And people down south still call it the Leeds Devil.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
And in fact, the Leeds family, they call it the Shords Devil. Because
of the
there's some
house.
dispute as to which family the creature was born
Right.
into.
They said the Shorts house, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it just couldn't be more wrong.
Ideally, you get some kind of a good boxer coming out of South Jersey, and he can call himself the Jersey Devil. You know,
That would work.
That would work, right? It's different than that. Okay, real quickly, what about other legends like of other countries like Norway or?
Well, I had the good fortune of having a Fulbright fellowship, so I spent a whole year in Norway. Which was kind of fun because I'm partly of Norwegian descent myself. And it is interesting. In Norway, they have quite a few legends around Saint Olaf, who's the patron saint of the country. There's many stories about the various wars that they fought with Sweden.
Right.
Which I think a lot of Americans don't know about that, but the Swedes and the Norwegians, they don't get along.
They're just next door to each other.
Yeah. And then there are many stories about the Nazi occupation during World War II.
Yes.
Which contrasts here in the United States, we have our own patriotic legends, the legends of the frontier, Daniel Boone, Davy Crockett, the American Revolution, how the French helped us out, and the Civil War. And I'm always fascinated when it comes to wars, the loser remembers a lot longer than the winner.
Really?
Yeah. In every courthouse in the South, you have a Confederate soldier holding a rifle, defiantly looking north.
Yeah.
Never forgive, never forget. The loser remembers a lot longer.
Right.
And to me, even more fascinating, we're talking about a recent war, is the Vietnam War. And if you recall, the movies Rambo First Blood Part 1 and Rambo First Blood Part 2, this is what created the legend of the POW MIA. And it's just mind-boggling to me as a folklorist. Most historians will tell us that when the war was over, the North Vietnamese gave up the prisoners. What would be their motive for keeping them? It's difficult and expensive to keep prisoners. You have to pay for their food, their lodging, the guards. It makes no sense. But it's part of American legendary that they were still being held. And I remember, in Rambo First Blood Part 2, Rambo is commissioned by the CIA to go back to Vietnam to report on the prison camps to see if there's still any POWs. And sure enough, in the movie, there are POWs in Vietnam. And he's only one guy. So he's only able to rescue one POW. You can't rescue the whole camp. And then he goes to the mountain or small hill, which is the pickup point. And the CIA helicopter is supposed to pick him up with the POW. But the evil CIA guy back in the command center, when the soldiers in the command center said, "He's got one of ours," and the soldiers are all excited. And the CIA guy says, "Abort the mission, abort the mission." And the helicopter leaves, and Rambo is surrounded by the NVA. And he has to drop his Kalashnikov. And so that reinforces the notion that the American soldiers were betrayed by their own government, for which there is not a scant piece of evidence, but it's widely believed because people don't read history books; they watch Rambo movies.
They do. People, you're right. Television directs everybody's lives today.
To me, it's fascinating. Just about every post office in North America, you have the American flag and the POW MIA flag.
Right, yeah.
And there's no official authorization for that whatsoever. Mm-hmm. But who's going to tell the postmaster you can't do it?
Right.
I mean, it's widely believed to be true, which is the definition of legend.
Right.
And so nobody's going to tell the postmaster to take it down. It would create a tremendous revolt among the citizens.
And it's, I guess, a tribute.
I like to use that because it shows the power of legend.
Right.
Another interesting thing is in my travels as a folklorist throughout the South, you don't see too many Confederate flags anymore because the trouble is that the racists have appropriated the Confederate flag. I mean, it used to be an emblem of Southern pride.
Right.
Now it's an emblem of discrimination against African Americans. Yep. And so most people in the South, they don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. But they do have the POW MIA flag.
It's interesting. Can you stick around for a few more minutes, or are you on any kind of a schedule?
Are we done?
We're going to take a break for a second.
We're going to take a break, and then we'll finish up.
Okay.
You are listening to the Haunted New Jersey podcast, and my name is Jörg Heyer. I'm the host of the German Ghost Hunter podcast, Paranormal Süd podcast. I've been listening to the Haunted New Jersey podcast for quite a long time. It is the main reason for me to start my own podcast. Visit us at www.paranormal-süd.de and listen to the first German Ghost Hunter podcast.
Okay, so we want to thank Angus for coming in and talking with us.
Yeah, it was a great conversation.
Absolutely.
Jersey Devil stuff. We've got so many Jersey Devil fans.
Absolutely.
And I don't mean the hockey team this time. So many fans in South Jersey, especially. The Jersey Devil. Everybody loves that legend.
Right.
So it was great to bring him in.
So what do we have? Some email to read?
We've got some emails to read. Now, first thing I want to do is I actually want to congratulate a friend of ours, friend of the show, Brother Bernie Seif.
Sure.
Great guy, good friend of ours. He recently got an award, the Building Bridges Award, for work by the Traditional Chinese Medicine World Foundation. As our listeners remember, Brother Bernie was very involved with Chinese medicine. He's taken a number of trips over there, and he's very respected in the field. And I think it's great. He got this great award. Another thing I want to do is, we have some emails that I wanted to read. The first email actually came from a friend of mine, Mr. Mark Ryan, and he happened to be listening to our show. Great show, Al. I listened to it here in Kuwait. He was on a business trip over in Kuwait. He says, kind of radio program you wish was on while you're driving home from vacation late at night.
Yeah.
Everyone in the car is asleep, and you're just sitting in on a cool conversation. Oh, that's nice.
That was cool.
Say. Yeah, Mark's a great guy. Enjoyed it very much. Did not know the Amityville Horror was a hoax.
A lot of people don't.
I know. Isn't that something?
Mm-hmm.
Googled Amityville Horror, and it was confirmed as a hoax there as well. Thanks, Mark. That was nice of you to send that. Another email that we received, also from who we talked about before, my friend Spencer Hughes from Fox Radio. Remember, I told you things were happening in Spencer's place, and he had sent me an email. We hadn't been in touch for a while, and he sent me an email. It says, "Hi, Al. Hope you are well. I am addicted to your Haunted New Jersey podcasts." This is like about the 5th email that we've got recently. I guess people are just finding us again or something.
I know. It seems like it.
Yeah. Was just sitting in the driveway finishing one up as I got home. I'm learning a ton from these. I downloaded all 83 today on my iPod. Well, now you got another one, Spence. You got 84 here. Call me sometime. I joined a local ghost hunting group and going on my first official private home investigation this Saturday. This actually was a couple weeks ago. Anyway, let's chat. And I did talk to him about that investigation.
How'd it go?
It went very well.
Okay.
I was when I first talked to him about it, he had said that there were a lot of negative, influences, and I tried to tell him that most negativity comes from the investigators and the family, not from the spiritual end of it. But and then a real quick one here from Dawn Kramer in Atlanta, Georgia. Awesome lecture by Lloyd, really informative and enjoyable. Obviously referring to the last podcast.
Right, number 83.
You put out. Yeah. So keep the cards and letters coming in, kiddies.
Yeah.
Anything that you got? Anything coming up?
I have 3 more lectures left in November, but I think they'd have to go back to, Podcast 81 or whatever it is.
Or I put it on Facebook for the Friends of
Yeah, right.
If anybody wants to join Friends of Haunted New Jersey, we're on Facebook. We've got close to 200 members now.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just look us up. What do they just search on Facebook for Haunted New
just
Jersey?
do search for Haunted New Jersey or Friends of Haunted New Jersey, and they can sign up or sign on. There's also your schedule is up there too.
Oh, okay.
So they can find it there.
Oh, okay. Because I have 3 left in November, the 5th, 14th, and 21st. And we are still redesigning hauntednewjersey.com. You can go there and check out information on us and listen to our latest podcasts directly from the site. There's a link for the podcast. And again, if you have any questions or you want any lecture information, you can email me directly at info@hauntednewjersey.com as I get all the email. So we want to wish everyone definitely a happy Halloween as we leave.
Wish Gordon a happy Halloween.
Yeah, Gordon couldn't make it tonight. Yeah, we didn't even mention Gordon.
Yeah. He was here in spirit.
Yeah, he had a prior commitment. He couldn't make it here tonight. So have a happy Halloween, a safe Halloween.
Happy birthday, Gio.
Yeah, and I guess we're going to probably do at least 1 or 2 podcasts in November, right?
Yeah, I'll be out in November, and we're going to do an investigation maybe.
Hopefully.
That'll be cool.
All right, everybody, take it easy.
Good night.